Ladies and gentlemen, today, let's talk about a silent yet powerful act, one that speaks louder than any words ever could. Silence, it's not revenge, it's not manipulation, it's not weakness, it's clarity. It's power. And when you go silent, when silence replaces your usual responses, the very first emotion that surfaces in his mind is confusion. He's used to a pattern, a rhythm, where every action of his sparked a reaction from you. Whether it was a text left on read, a careless comment, or distant behavior, he expected something in return. A question, an argument, a confrontation, or even just a sigh. But now, there's nothing, and that nothing is deafening to him. In the beginning, he might shrug it off, telling himself you're just busy or giving it time. But deep inside, something already feels off. He starts checking his phone more often, glancing at the screen, wondering why there's no notification from you. He notices the pause in a pattern he had taken for granted. He doesn't feel your energy chasing closure. There's no emotional outburst, no explanation, just silence, and that disturbs him more than any words ever could. He may start replaying the last things he said to you, looking for clues. Was I too harsh? Did I ignore her too long? Did I go too far this time? These questions run through his head, not because you explained anything, but because your lack of reaction is speaking volume. For someone who expected to always have your emotional availability, this sudden shift feels like walking into a room that used to be filled with light, now dark, still, and unfamiliar. He doesn't know how to respond because he no longer knows what you're thinking, feeling, or planning. He might even start reaching out indirectly through subtle actions like viewing your stories, liking old photos, or sending a random message just to see if you'll break the silence. But when you don't, it sends him into deeper thought. The absence of your reaction forces him to look inward. It pushes him into discomfort because he's no longer receiving your emotional cues to soothe his ego or calm his insecurity. He realizes he's no longer in control of the emotional exchange. And suddenly, silence becomes his biggest trigger. After the confusion settles in, something more unsettling begins to take shape inside his mind, doubt mixed with fear. That question creeps in, quietly at first, then louder. Is she really done this time? He's experienced your frustration before. Maybe he's seen you pull away for a few hours, or even a day, only to come back and explain yourself, to fight for the connection again. He grew used to that cycle. He counted on your return. Even if things got tense, deep down, he believed you'd come back because you always did. But this time feels different. This silence doesn't feel temporary. It doesn't carry the usual emotional tension. It's not laced with the energy of someone waiting to be chased. It feels final. Now, he starts pacing in his own thoughts. He starts checking the calendar. How many days has it been? He begins overanalyzing. Did I push her too far this time? Because when a woman who once cared so deeply suddenly stops speaking, it creates an uncomfortable silence that feels permanent. He may not admit it out loud, but inside there's panic, not the dramatic kind, the quiet kind, the kind that slowly takes over as realization sets in. He thinks about what you've tolerated in the past, the chances you gave, the conversations you tried to have, the red flags you noticed but overlooked. And now, as your silence stretches longer than before, the weight of all those moments starts to fall on him. He wonders, Is this silence the moment she decided she deserves more? Has she stopped hoping I'll change? Did I ignore one too many messages, forget one too many promises? Your silence begins to feel like a door slowly closing, not slammed, not locked, just quietly pulled shut. And the scariest part for him, he doesn't know if it will ever open again, because this time you didn't argue, you didn't explain, you didn't cry, you just stopped. And the longer you remain silent, the more real the question becomes in his mind. Maybe she's really done. And that possibility terrifies him. As your silence lingers, confusion and fear slowly begin to give way to something deeper: introspection. He starts questioning not just your silence, but the behavior that led to it. And that's when this powerful, unsettling thought begins to take root in his mind. Did I mess up more than I realized? At first, he may try to downplay it to himself. He'll convince his ego that it wasn't that serious, that maybe you're overreacting or being dramatic. But silence has a strange way of stripping away denial slowly and painfully. And in that silence, he doesn't have your voice to argue with. He only has his own thoughts echoing in his mind. He begins revisiting the timeline, thinking back to specific moments. The times he ignored you when you needed to talk, the subtle dismissals, the times he minimized your emotions, the broken promises he shrugged off, the apologies he never made because he thought he didn't need to. Each of those moments might have felt small at the time, but now they stack up. Your silence has made him see the pattern, and for the first time, he's not just looking at your reaction, he's reviewing his actions. Was I cold to her? Did I brush off things that really mattered to her? Was she trying to warn me all along, and I just didn't take her seriously? These questions begin to haunt him. He starts to remember the look in your eyes during those quiet moments when you weren't yelling, just quietly hurting. He recalls your voice when you were explaining the same thing for the third or fourth time, trying to get him to understand something that now seems so clear in hindsight. He finally begins to realize that the silence you've given him now isn't sudden. It's been building. This is the moment he starts understanding that maybe it wasn't one thing that made you go silent. Maybe it was everything, every ignored feeling, every invalidated emotion, every moment he thought you'd never walk away. And now, as the weight of your silence presses against his conscience, the thought becomes louder, heavier, and harder to escape. Maybe I did more damage than I ever realized. When silence stretches over time, it begins to do something unexpected. It creates space, and in that space, he starts to feel the absence of you. Not just your words or your presence in his inbox, but your energy, your care, your spirit, the emotional warmth you always carried in the background of his daily life. He might not admit it to anyone. He might even act unbothered on the surface, but behind that calm exterior is a growing, undeniable truth. He misses you. He misses the sound of your voice, not just when you spoke sweetly, but even when you were frustrated or trying to explain your point. He misses the way you asked about his day, checked on his health, remembered the little things that no one else ever bothered to. He misses your morning greetings and late night messages that made him feel like someone out there truly saw him. He misses the emotional safety you provided, often without credit, the kind of support that made even his worst days bearable just because you were there. And now, all those things he once overlooked begin to resurface in his mind like puzzle pieces that only make sense after they've been taken away. That playful teasing you did when he was too serious, the way you offered perspective when he was lost in his head, the softness in your voice when he was hurting and didn't even know how to say it. You became part of his routine without him even noticing, and now that you're silent, now that your voice isn't there to fill the spaces between his stress and his silence, he feels the quiet differently, because it's not just the silence of unanswered messages or missed calls, it's the silence of not being cared for in the way only you did. It's the silence of coming home mentally or emotionally and realizing the person who made that feel warm isn't waiting anymore. Even things he used to ignore or dismiss now feel meaningful. He may scroll through old messages, listen to old voice notes, revisit shared photos not just to remember you, but to remember how he felt when you were still around. And in that moment, he realizes he doesn't just miss the attention or the connection. He misses you, the person you were to him, the space you held, the comfort you gave, and the version of himself that only existed when he had you by his side. As your silence continues, another realization quietly dawns on him, one that surprises him, maybe even intimidates him a little. She's stronger than I thought. He used to believe he knew you well. He thought you were the kind of person who needed closure, who needed answers, who couldn't walk away without expressing every emotion. He assumed that if things got tense, you'd eventually reach out, not because he deserved it, but because you were emotionally invested. He believed that your care made you predictable, but your silence has shattered that illusion. The longer you say nothing, the more your restraint speaks for you. He realizes now that you didn't need to scream, cry, beg, or plead to be heard, because your silence is saying all the things your words never could. And it hits him differently. He underestimated you. He thought silence would be hard for you, that your heart would crack before your patience did. But you're not chasing clarity. You're not demanding answers. You're not trying to change his mind. You're just still, and that stillness holds power. He starts to realize that what he once mistook for emotional dependence was actually emotional depth. You didn't stay because you were weak. You stayed because you chose to care. But now that you've chosen not to engage, it becomes painfully clear you always had the power to walk away. You just didn't want to until now, and it shakes him, because he thought silence would make you seem fragile, like you gave up. But instead, it reveals something else: discipline, self-worth, boundaries. Now he sees that your silence isn't the silence of someone who's lost. It's the silence of someone who has found herself. He's stunned that you didn't fall apart without him. In fact, you look like someone who's protecting their peace, someone who no longer needs to prove anything, and in a world where many beg to be seen, your choice to withdraw becomes the loudest statement of all. That realization alone makes him view you with new eyes, not as the emotional partner who once fought for him, but as the woman who finally chose herself and had the strength to follow through with it. As your silence continues, another realization quietly dawns on him, one that surprises him, maybe even intimidates him a little. She's stronger than I thought. He used to believe he knew you well. He thought you were the kind of person who needed closure, who needed answers, who couldn't walk away without expressing every emotion. He assumed that if things got tense, you'd eventually reach out, not because he deserved it, but because you were emotionally invested. He believed that your care made you predictable, but your silence has shattered that illusion. The longer you say nothing, the more your restraint speaks for you. He realizes now that you didn't need to scream, cry, beg, or plead to be heard because your silence is saying all the things your words never could, and it hits him differently. He underestimated you. He thought silence would be hard for you, that your heart would crack before your patience did. But you're not chasing clarity. You're not demanding answers. You're not trying to change his mind. You're just still, and that stillness holds power. He starts to realize that what he once mistook for emotional dependence was actually emotional depth. You didn't stay because you were weak. You stayed because you chose to care. But now that you've chosen not to engage, it becomes painfully clear you always had the power to walk away. You just didn't want to, until now, and it shakes him, because he thought silence would make you seem fragile, like you gave up. But instead, it reveals something else: discipline, self-worth, boundaries. Now, he sees that your silence isn't the silence of someone who's lost. It's the silence of someone who has found herself. He's stunned that you didn't fall apart without him. In fact, you look like someone who's protecting their peace. Someone who no longer needs to prove anything. And in a world where many beg to be seen, your choice to withdraw becomes the loudest statement of all. That realization alone makes him view you with new eyes, not as the emotional partner who once fought for him, but as the woman who finally chose herself and had the strength to follow through with it. As time passes and your silence deepens, his mind begins wandering into darker, more uncomfortable territory, the space where ego, insecurity, and jealousy live. One thought starts to take shape, persistent and quietly tormenting. Has someone else caught her attention? At first, he may try to dismiss it. He may tell himself you're just upset, maybe taking space. But the longer you remain silent, the longer you withhold your energy, your affection, your voice, the more that quiet begins to echo with uncertainty. And that's when his imagination kicks in. He starts wondering who's filling the space he used to occupy. Is there someone texting you good morning now? Is someone else listening to you, showing up for you, appreciating what he didn't? Is there someone treating you with the consistency and care he once thought he had time to give? Later, these thoughts don't come from love. They come from realization, the realization that your attention was never guaranteed, and now that it's gone, it might not be coming back. He may start comparing himself to others, real or imagined. He'll scroll through your social media looking for clues. New like, a subtle caption, a smile that looks too genuine. Even if there's no one there, the mere idea that someone could be is enough to eat away at his sense of control. You see, he believed you'd always be around. Even if things weren't perfect, he felt like he had time to figure himself out, time to mature, time to treat you better when he was ready. But now that you're silent, he realizes that time might be up. And if someone else saw your worth before he finally acted on it, he knows he wouldn't even have the right to be angry because you waited. You gave chances. You gave your heart. Now the possibility that another man might be speaking to you with the respect and consistency he failed to offer becomes his silent torment. Even the idea of you smiling at someone else, laughing freely, feeling understood, seen, protected shakes something in him, because it means the one thing he never truly considered before: you might have moved on emotionally, even if nothing official has changed. He wonders if someone out there is now seeing the woman he once took for granted and treating her like the rare soul she is. And worse, he knows it could have been him. If only he had valued you when he had the chance. As the days stretch on in silence and he no longer hears from you, no updates, no warmth, not even a trace of the emotional presence that once filled his world. A sobering question begins to settle in the quiet corners of his mind. Did I take love for granted? And deep down, he already knows the answer. In hindsight, everything feels louder: the moments when you tried, when you gave, when you stayed patient even when your heart was tired. He begins to realize how consistent you were with your love, how you showed up not only in big, obvious ways, but in subtle ones too, remembering the little things, checking in even on his quiet days, making room for his emotions even when yours were overflowing. You were always there, emotionally available, emotionally invested, and he may have appreciated it in moments, but he never really valued it. He assumed you would always be there because you always were. Now, without your words to reassure him, without your presence to center him, he starts to feel the impact of what he once dismissed: the way you listened when no one else did, the effort you made to understand even his most complicated moods, the patience you gave him during his emotional storms. He remembers the times you chose him on the days he wasn't at his best, when he didn't have much to offer, when he pushed you away and you still stayed. And he begins to see that your love wasn't just emotional support, it was sacrifice. You put his needs ahead of yours more times than he can count. You adjusted your tone, your schedule, your expectations, not because you had to, but because you wanted to love him in a way that made him feel safe. Now, in the absence of that love, he feels the void it once filled, and it dawns on him that what he took for granted was something rare. Not everyone gives the way you did. Not everyone forgives the way you did. Not everyone loves that deeply, that purely, that consistently. He remembers the times he brushed off your concerns, rolled his eyes at your emotions, told you were too sensitive or overthinking. Back then, it was easy to overlook your love because it was always available like oxygen, but now your silence has made him realize he's been breathing borrowed air, and you were the one giving it, and that's when the guilt starts to grow, because the more he reflects, the clearer it becomes. You weren't asking for too much, you were giving too much, to someone who didn't truly see the weight you were carrying to keep the love alive. And the worst part, he knows now that love like yours doesn't come around twice. As silence continues to stretch between you, a shift begins to take place in his perception, a shift that begins quietly, in small thoughts, but grows stronger the longer you're gone. He begins to realize something he never really considered before. I thought she needed me, but maybe I needed her more. In the relationship, he may have assumed he held the emotional upper hand. Maybe he thought you depended on him for validation, for stability, for connection. Maybe he believed you were emotionally attached in a way he wasn't. And so, he moved with a kind of quiet confidence, never truly fearing that he might lose you because he saw himself as the one being needed. But now that you're silent, not begging, not explaining, not checking in, not asking for his attention, that illusion crumbles. And what remains is the startling, sobering truth. You were not the one who needed him, he was the one who needed you. He begins to feel the absence in ways that shake his foundation. He notices the silence in his daily routine, the empty spaces where your voice used to exist. You were the one who reminded him to breathe when life overwhelmed him, the one who softened his edges when his world turned cold, the one who saw through his pride and gave him safety without asking for anything in return. Now he sees that your emotional strength became his quiet refuge. You were the one who always listened, not because it was convenient, but because it mattered to you when he mattered to no one else. You supported him, celebrated him, comforted him, not out of obligation, but from a place of genuine care. He begins to understand that he leaned on you more than he realized. It wasn't always in dramatic ways. Sometimes it was the way you could calm him with just a few words, the way you read between his silences, the way you reminded him who he was when the world made him forget. He begins to understand something crucial. It wasn't your love that was fragile, it was his ego that mistook your giving for dependence. And now that you've pulled away, now that you've removed your emotional presence from his life, he starts to feel a void he doesn't know how to fill. He feels ungrounded, uncertain. He starts to notice that he doesn't sleep as peacefully, that he's overthinking things he used to shrug off, that there's no longer someone reminding him of his worth without expecting anything in return. Your silence, more than anything, has stripped away the illusion of dominance he held in the relationship, and in its place, a truth rises that humbles him to his core. You weren't clinging to him, you were carrying him. Emotionally, mentally, even spiritually, in your own quiet way. And now that your voice is gone, he's left alone with a question that rattles his pride and reveals the real imbalance that existed all along. I thought I was the one she leaned on. But what if I've been leaning on her the entire time and just didn't know it? As the silence stretches on, something even deeper begins to dawn on him, something he hadn't noticed before. Or maybe something he refused to acknowledge. She changed. And I didn't see it. In his mind, he had frozen you in time. He thought he knew who you were, how you would respond, what you would tolerate, what you would always come back from. He believed that no matter how far he pushed, you'd still be that same version of yourself, waiting, forgiving, hoping. But now, in the stillness, he realizes something sobering. That version of you no longer exists. He starts to reflect not just on what's happening now, but on what's happened over time. He remembers the subtle signs, the way your tone changed in conversations, the way your responses became shorter, the way your eyes started carrying more weight and fewer words. You were pulling back long before you went silent. You were evolving quietly, steadily, right in front of him, but he didn't notice, or maybe he did and chose to ignore it. He was too busy assuming your love was constant, too wrapped up in his own routine, his own needs, his own comfort. He didn't take the time to see that you were growing not just as a partner, but as a person. You were becoming more self-aware, more discerning, more protective of your peace, and little by little, your tolerance for emotional imbalance was fading. Now that you're silent, he finally sees the truth he was blind to for so long. You've changed not out of bitterness, but out of awakening, not out of anger, but out of clarity. You began to realize what drained you, what weighed you down, what no longer aligned with your spirit. And while he stayed the same, confident that you'd never leave, never shift, never demand more, you quietly started becoming someone who no longer needed to explain your worth. You stopped waiting for someone to meet you at your level, and instead began rising alone. Your silence now isn't just a response to him. It's a reflection of how far you've come from the version of yourself who would have fought to be understood. And now he's left staring at the space where you used to be, only to realize he didn't lose the woman he once knew. He lost the woman he never truly saw changing right before his eyes. So when she goes silent, don't mistake it for emptiness. It is not the absence of emotion, it's the presence of realization. She has seen enough, felt enough, given enough, and now, without warning or explanation, she chooses peace over chaos, clarity over confusion, self-respect over repeating cycles. Silence in her world isn't weakness, it's evolution, and by the time he realizes what her silence truly meant, she's no longer waiting for him to understand it. She's already gone, not out of anger, but because she finally remembered her worth.